Y'all, this is a really funny one for me. I told Alex before we started, but Alex Bush is somebody that I've been following low key for a while, really from like a training perspective, just a really great coach perspective. And my setter snuck into his DMs, which was hilarious because he doesn't need my business advice. But I was like, oh, that's a reminder. I should probably reach out to him and get him on the podcast. So, Alex, thanks for hopping on.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that your setter accidentally snuck into my DMs.
It's funny. Sometimes she hits the right people, but like not at the right time. But this was perfect for me. But like we were talking about before this started, I wanted to bring you on and kind of talk about a hodgepodge of topics for coaches listening, right? So this one's going to be diving into your business adventure and kind of what you've built, how you've done that, but also training optimization as well, as I feel like you're very well known for that. So I'm just going to go ahead and like kick it off, right? So
Sure.
when you were starting your business back in like 2014, which I feel like was right when the first Fitfluencers were coming out, right? Tell me kind of what the landscape was and how you carved your path in the online coaching space.
Sure. So yeah, we got started in 2014, and I'm in college at the time to set the groundwork. And I am transitioning out of playing college baseball. So I have made the decision to no longer play baseball, and I'm wanting to pursue what I'm doing now full time. I had a vision that this is exactly what I wanted to do, and no one was going to stop me. My parents were not very thrilled with it. My baseball coach was not thrilled that I was no longer going to be playing. And I had to find money to replace my scholarship because my parents were not going to help me with college at the time. And so I knew starting this, it was a good opportunity to try and figure that out. And so how I got started, truthfully, was that I would get on Facebook every day and send between like 50 and 100 messages. And people were not as desensitized to cold messages as they are now. They were not getting them, especially on Facebook at that time. You were really only talking to your friends and so on. And so I had a lot of luck in trying to sell these $20 training programs. I was just reaching out to anyone that would accept my messages and asking if I could write them a training program for $20. And I would do that every single day. And it got a lot of repetitions in writing these training programs. And to be brutally honest with you, I would let the people negotiate with me. That they would say, not 20, how about 10? And I would not bat an eye. I would take the 10 and still do the exact same amount of work to write these training programs. And so for the first at least 3 months of getting started, as I was going through my degree work and getting my exercise science degree, I was writing these training programs for people on Facebook that they would tell me how many days, they would tell me if they what equipment they had, and I would just write training programs. And that was how I write those. And then that's how I got started with my online clients, is that people who really like that ended up working with me as clients. And so I got started at a probably pretty similar to how people now get started, of just reaching out to people and trying to get an opportunity. And yeah, that's kind of the origin of it all.
Well, that's similar to me, but it was 2019 where I'm sure you get this. Like you didn't know what a DM strategy was. You just knew you had to talk to people, right? And that's
Mhm.
same thing. I just started sending messages and I think now why there's such a ick when it comes to talking about those things is because they're so, everyone markets on something that's shiny, right? There's the coaches that are like, do all of this with my AI, whatever toolkit and never DM anyone, right? Oh, yeah, sounds great. Then there's the people that are like, do all this and only get inbound leads. There's such a hate with like sending messages. But I love that you said that because you're just honestly offering help, right? And I didn't start at $20, but I was like $100 for, nutrition coaching. So I get that. I think you were just doing whatever you could. And that was primarily Facebook. I'm assuming you were on Instagram as well.
Yeah, it was the the blue top and bottom Instagram with like the feed that was so different than what it looks like now. And on Instagram, I was much more afraid to post about fitness stuff because that's where my friends were. On Facebook, it kind of was like my parents, and then my friends were on there, but everybody had already kind of migrated over to Instagram. So I had this kind of like private life or private part of my life on Facebook where I was just reaching out in the direct messages or whatever it was called at the time, and getting this fitness advice and so on. And so then from there, we started a YouTube channel, and YouTube felt the same way, where not many of my friends were on YouTube, nor did they really even know what I was doing on there. And so I was just documenting my process of being on YouTube, and that's where everything started to pick up even more through the YouTube channel. I was documenting what it was like to work full time and also be in school full time and also working out. And I think a lot of people resonated with that at the time, where I was working out at 11 o'clock at night. I was working out at midnight and spending 2 hours there because I had all the energy in the world at 19, 20 years old. And so I'm just spending, I'm up for 18 hours of the day, and I'm videoing all of it and then cutting up a really simple, and you can go back on YouTube now and look at those very silly videos. And that was where we originally started our audience. And so, and got some clients as well.
I think the importance of this, just to stop for a second, is how much just like messy action you were taking.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think it's such an underrated tactic, where like we're so bombarded with information and gurus right now that it's we just stop ourselves from taking the next step, right? Even if we don't know if it's logical or not, we're like, no, well, that person said this podcast said something different. And we're just like so bombarded that it's hard to even do anything. Like I hate when people say it's too saturated to start a business, because there's, what, 5 billion people almost on Instagram. And it's like, there's so many people, like there's enough for everybody. And I promise you, your ideal client's feed is not saturated like yours is with business coaches and things of that nature. And so it's important to put that into perspective. But so shifting into training techniques and training optimization, right? Like I told you, we've got a lot of coaches listening. What would you say, because I know that you mentor coaches, right? What would you say are some of the biggest sticking points you're seeing whenever you're looking at a coach who's trying to just boost their skill set with training and just make sure that what they're providing is going to get their clients results?
Sure. So I think the first thing that a lot of people miss out on is taking the individual into account. I think that there is a lot more that needs to be done in the onboarding process to understand how the person functions and what their experience level is. And not every exercise is going to look the same for each person as well. And taking time to review videos and getting them going through these different main movement patterns. Like every person that onboards with Physique Development, it has to send a base amount of 5 videos. So they have a hinge pattern. So they have to do a deadlift, or they have to do an RDL. They need to do a squat pattern. And all these are being filmed from the side profile. So we can see exactly how their body is maneuvering. And we have them doing a press and a row. And then they have, why am I blanking on the fifth one? There's a fifth exercise, and I don't know why my brain is not allowing me to remember. But with those videos, we get a good base of exactly what their coordination looks like. And then if they're talking about any pain or discomfort, or I don't feel my glutes in this particular exercise, we have a much better grasp as to why that's happening, rather than it just being like, well, you're just not doing the exercise right. Here's another video. Do exactly what this video says, and you should be able to do it. It's like, well, in a perfect world, that may work, but in the real world, where we've had lots of experience and helped thousands of people, that is not how this is going to work for the vast majority of them. And so getting the individualized approach and really meeting the person where they're at is so tremendously important. A lot of the coaches that I end up working with and mentoring on their program design is that they're writing 1 to like 4 different training programs, and then they're just having everyone run those and kind of cycling through. And when you're in a place where you're maybe working with a lot of novices or people who have not spent a lot of time in the gym, that may work for a period of time. And it may work for the majority, but it's not going to work for everybody. And I think that with where we're at within online coaching, we need to have results for everybody. And that it comes down to making it as individualized as we possibly can, so that that person can succeed. And it is going to take more time, and it is going to take more knowledge, and so on and so forth. But the best thing that I've been able to gather within doing this for 10 years is that the best marketing is going to be word of mouth and you getting the success for someone and then them being able to tell their friend, then being able to tell their family member that they have to do it because this is how amazing it was for me. And you're going to get those referrals by doing amazing work with each and every person, not just some of the people that you work with.
Where do you think the line is with like individualization and what can be repeatable? Obviously, you're going to have a standard way to onboard people. Of course,
Sure.
the system's there, but you know, as coaches are growing and start to expand with teams of ACs like you've got, right?
Mm.
Where like how individualized are we talking? Right? Because I do know that a lot of coaches they get stuck in scale because they think everything has to be individualized. So I know there's a
Mhm.
line there.
Yeah, so I think that you can write base training protocols that are going to be able to kind of swap out exercises and the amount of sets that are being performed or the repetition ranges that are being done, depending on the person. So you've got your base work that's going to be there, but then you're going to be catering it to what that person has available to them and so on and so forth. And so there are going to be, I would more so say that there's going to be base templates that you're going to be able to write training off of that is going to allow for you to build for that person as they're going through your coaching program.
Fair. So is there something that like let's talk about the intake form. Maybe when you're
Okay.
reviewing those videos or that's part of it, right? Is there any question or tactic or technique that you might think, hey, this is something that really gets us great answers so that we can be individualized? I know half the time when I see a coach's intake form, it's so vague. It's
Yes.
no wonder that you're missing so much stuff, right? And so I'm curious to know maybe a few tricks or tips you might have.
So for our intake, we and this has changed over time because when we were first getting started, it was like if someone wanted to start as soon as humanly possible, we were going to make it happen. So if they were on the call or we were getting them to sign up through email and they're like, I want to start tomorrow, I was going to stay up all night and I was going to get it all done so they could have it in the morning. And so that was the grind of that time. I have learned over the years that that's not necessary. And so now we spend, it could be a week, it could be 10 days, it could be 14 days, because I take a lot of time of going through. We have, I think it's 5 or 6 pages that we're going to have of questions that are going to be digging deeper. And a lot of it has to do with overall experience to what they've done in the past, but also where their mindset is, what their knowledge is, so that we can take that information, use our knowledge, and connect the dots of like, where can we build them up so that they have a runway of improving so that because one of our big things is that we want to be the last coach that anyone needs. We want them to gain the knowledge throughout that process. So we're building out kind of like a curriculum on our side of where this person can expand their knowledge to better understand themselves, but also how they can take care of their nutrition and their training and so on. And so what we'll do is have that intake form, and then we may have 1 to 3 calls before the person gets started so that we have a lot of clarity in when they actually do start. Because that first 4 weeks of someone starting their package is so tremendously important to however long the package is going to be, whether it be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, or a year. That first 4 weeks is the most important, in my opinion, because you are getting buy-in and them trusting you. And so you need to hit a home run from day one and have a lot of clarity and have them understand how much you care as well as how much you're investing back into them because they just put a big investment into you financially. And that may have been the last money that they had, or it may have been a big lump sum for them. And you need to give them that comfort of like, this was the best decision that you possibly could have made. And I'm making that same investment, if not more, right back into you right now. And I need you to execute as soon as we get started. And so we spend the time depending on where like what that person needs, and make sure that we're crystal clear as day one gets started. And if we're not, then we'll push back a little bit to make sure that that's the case. But I'm really, really focused on having a very good first 30 days.
Are you doing, and I'm sure it's not you directly, but are any of your
Mhm.
coaches doing any kind of like touch point calls in that 30-day time frame just to kind of check on how they're feeling, go over habits,
Yeah.
whatever?
So we have our client success coach who is going through and talking to all the coaches who are that she's texting, she's emailing, going back through and making sure that everything is going well throughout the process. And then they've got their check-ins through Loom every week that we're assessing progress within training and so on. But then the client success coach, I think, does an amazing job and having that extra touch point in between and then that person allowing for us to either schedule a call with the coach if it's necessary, if we're needing to clear something up or to expand deeper on things, or things may need to be adjusted as well because life has changed or whatever the case may be. But having those touch points, I think, is tremendously helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm always curious because similar to you, I mean, that's just a fact, right? Like if somebody's not feeling like they're getting results in 30 days, you've lost them. And I
Mhm.
think whenever you're in that phase where you're either balancing a pretty stacked roster on your own, or maybe you've got one assistant coach and you're still struggling because you're growing your business and there's a million things to look at, right? Not that we want fulfillment to ever suffer, but it is hard to manage all of that to make sure that clients are succeeding. So if somebody is not at the level that you're at, right? And they're
Mhm.
like, oh, that's a great idea. Because I talk about success metrics too, right? How would you encourage a coach to begin with kind of monitoring that success or progress within the first 30 days?
So I think in terms of monitoring the progress, I think that creating the checkpoints of what you are looking to have happen along the way of what's realistic for what's the most optimal, incredible result that you could get that you're looking for over the first 14 days. What's the most likely, and then what is under, like what is not getting to just par and kind of setting those milestones or markers for what you are wanting to see. Fat loss is a little bit easier. So if someone's coming in from a muscle building perspective, we can spend a little bit of time here where this is going to be different. Like with fat loss, you're going to have markers of what's the rate of loss that you're wanting to see week to week. Are they on point to that? Are they behind it? Are they ahead of it? That's simple. But when we look at the muscle building part, this is where you're going to be able to put in far greater markers for the client that they can take track of, and then they can get the feedback of like, I'm on the right path. Same thing can go for the fat loss, but with the training, you can have things within the exercises where they are able to set their baseline that first week that they're coming to you within the rep ranges that you're utilizing. So maybe they're using 150 pounds on the hip thrust, and it's like, okay, by the second week or the third week, we want to try and get 160 pounds for that same rep range. And then they're able to do that. Oh my gosh, I'm on the right path. And you can do that for multiple exercises. Some clients like to have those markers for every single exercise for their entire session, which is a lot to do from a coaching perspective. I would encourage your clients to maybe pick two or three and focus on those, as those are the priority or whatever you want to call them. But you can set those up, and then you can also have some things in place that you can look at from a habit tracking standpoint for them that they're not doing a great job of when they come to you. Maybe that is nutrition, maybe that's their sleep, maybe that's them having a morning routine or somehow taking care of themselves, and putting these things in place and allowing for them to check the box of like, hell yes, I'm doing the right thing, is so powerful for them to be able to create momentum for themselves and have so much more success alongside of you. And then this is only going to be beneficial to you as you have the 6 month package or whatever it is. Their results are going to skyrocket because you've just set these micro goals along the way. And the big goal is going to happen just because of that.
I think so many coaches also struggle to just create a framework, right? We have this idea when we first get started that everyone is different. Everyone's at a different level. And then you start to realize, no, no, no. I mean, maybe nuances, but like you have a framework. And so it becomes hard to create success metrics of any kind when you don't have a standard, right? And so I think, I'm sure you talk about this with your clients too, but creating that standard and what it is that you can easily create, like you said, markers, whether it's a 7 day, 14, 30, etc., to see if somebody is at pace, off
Mhm.
track, whatever, right? And that's going to be so critical. So, something that I notice with coaches when I'm looking at some of their programming is that newer coaches, or people that are trying to be more advanced, but they're not there yet, are doing kind of that hodgepodge kitchen sink type method where they're doing like crazy tempos and just like drop sets, rest pauses, color coding. And they're not really there yet. They're throwing everything into one thing, right? Multiple stimuli. So would love to know your thoughts on just, you know, rep ranges, implementing things
Sure.
like that, how to kind of add that into your coaching and feel confident when doing so.
So this is, I mean, this is probably the thing that I mentor on the most. And with my mentorship, it's a full 6 months of us cranking through this for an hour a week. And so, as you can imagine, on this podcast, we're not going to be able to get through a ton of that information. And if you guys are more interested, you can email me and learn more about it. But nevertheless, so when we're looking at the structure of this, I think that the main thing that a lot of people need to take home is that if we can stick with one specific training stimulus per phase and kind of write these out for 4 to 8 weeks, it's probably a good place for us to be in. And so what I mean by the different stimuli is that we can have more of a strength or hypertrophy or more endurance or metabolically um, emphasized stimulus that we can have in place. And so if we are utilizing more of a strength or neurologically demanding stimulus, we would have maybe a rep range of 3 to 6. That would be a window that we could be in. And then we would also have a set allotment that could be anywhere from 3 to 5 for the exercises that we have in place there. And so you could write a training protocol that would line up nicely with that. And you would want to utilize exercises that were probably a little bit more demanding from a lengthened bias perspective. And again, if I'm talking a little bit over anyone's head at this moment, email me and I can help you here. um, and that is going to be one thing. And tracking those metrics of increasing the weight per those exercises is a great tool. And then you would be able to go into some hypertrophy work, which would be kind of a little bit of a crossover here within the 6 repetition range when we're talking about the strength work. But you could go as low as 6 reps if someone is really strong and they are well executing these movements. But maybe you want to stay more in that 8 to 12 range for this period and these exercises. That would be a good thing for you to stay in. And then you have more of a metabolically demanding training that this gets a little bit more vast. We could go anywhere from as low as 6, again, more of an advanced trainee. I would say probably more between like 8 and 20 repetitions with more of a rest period that's going to be around, 30 seconds or so. And this is going to be more of a shortened bias exercise selection when we're utilizing the metabolic training. And so we want to use all three of these in their own avenue and kind of be able to maneuver our way through and be able to track the metrics within those training to be able to go back and say, okay, in the previous neurological phase, we used this exercise and this was the rep range that we utilized. This was um, the weight that we utilize. Let's try and beat that now that we're coming back to this and we're right here. We've been able to improve our metabolic conditioning. We've also been able to improve our muscle density. And now we're coming back to our strength. It's maybe been 10 or 12 weeks since we've been here. Let's get back into this and be able to see what improvements we've made by taking our time away from this and then being able to maneuver through that over time. And this allows for you to have a little bit of maybe exercise variance as well as the variance in the rep and set allotments for your client to be able to have success. And it also gives you the feedback of how does this client respond or how does this client recover from the training volume that I have in place, tracking the sets and the intensity and so on. And so you're able to gather a lot of data for the client and you can get more individualized as the person is able to stay with you. And this is something that I see a lot within my own clients where I have a client who has been with me for more than a year or 2 years that their program design is so specific and I have so much data to pull from that they're able to get very predictable results because of the data that I have collected. And so that's another thing and probably another, conversation of tracking this information, keeping it all organized for each and every client and being able to take the notes and so on from your check-ins and all that fun stuff. I have hard drives I have every client case that I have worked on for the last 10 years all saved. And if any client comes back, I'm able to refer back to them. This is a little bit of me being neurotic, but this is probably if you guys are new to me and maybe you get into my content after this, you're going to see it everywhere. So
I don't know why anyone would delete a client's stuff though, right?
Yeah,
Like you should always save that. Like for whatever reason, like just save that absolutely. Question on failure and intensity. So, failure, how often should you really be going to failure? And I say this because I've worked with a ton of coaches and all very popular names on the internet. And I've, on multiple occasions been told to go to failure every set, like constantly. And I know that's not like optimal, right? But I'm curious to know how often you're coaching that and then how you're cueing intensity because that's hard with online coaching sometimes.
sure. So now it's dawning on me what that fifth video was from earlier. So that fifth video is taking a leg extension set to complete failure. So this gives us an understanding of where their understanding of their strength or their ability to reach failure is at. So how we utilize this is that we tell the client to get in the leg extension and select a weight that they would normally do for 8 repetitions. And then we have them go until you physically cannot move the leg pad anymore. It's a very safe environment to be able to do this. It's probably the safest way to teach a client how they can get to failure. It's pretty much injury impossible unless they just completely screw up the exercise, which is hasn't happened in the entire time of me teaching it this way. Knock on wood, I guess. So from that video alone, I'm able to make an understanding of where they're at because I may have someone who I watch that video and I can see, oh my gosh, they have no idea how strong they actually are. And so they'll get programming that is encouraging them to go to failure very often because what they think is failure is like 3 or 4 reps shy of anything close to failure. And this is in part to they haven't had a training partner before and they haven't had the opportunity of someone looking at their training up until this point. And so they're going to see on their training that they're going to failure a lot. And then as we continue to progress and they get a better understanding of what failure actually is, then that will decrease over time as they send videos each week within their check ins. But then on the flip side, if I have someone who is sick in the head and they come to me with that first video and they pick a weight that they could do for 8 and I can tell that they are grinding to get to 8 in that particular set and they're fighting for every inch of it. I'm not going to program failure a whole lot for that particular person because I know what demand that's going to put on their body to go to that level multiple times through a session. And so then you've got both ends of the spectrum that I just talked about, and a majority of your clients are going to fall somewhere in between there. And so you've got to kind of gauge on what that's going to be for them. It's not going to be all the time, and it's not going to be not at all, depending on where that person, especially it's going to depend on the exercise as well. So, for example, if someone is doing bicep curls, I may have all of their bicep training because they're not training direct bicep work all that much through their entire week of training. Every set may be to failure. If they're recovering well from it, and this is how we can push and try to add a little bit of weight and challenge to it, they may only have 2 exercises, or I'm sorry, 2 sets for bicep curls. I'm going to take both of those sets to failure. But if someone has, let's say, a barbell back squat, I'm probably not taking that to failure. It's more of what is the environment? How much volume are we doing per the muscle group for the entire week? If someone's wanting to grow their glutes and they, are training 2 or 3 sessions that are pretty glute focused, we may only be taking 1 or 2 of those sets to failure and trying to accumulate more volume with an RIR of 2 or an RP of 8, for example, on more of those sets so that we can accumulate that total volume. Whereas if we were to push more to failure on a consistent basis, they may not get the same quality of the exercises or sets that they would be performing thereafter.
So, one thing I want to, I guess, bring up that's not the technical side of training, but
Mhm.
just for coaches that are trying to get better, listening to people like you and all of the other amazing kind of industry leading coaches when it comes to programming, right? I think it's created a lot of self doubt
Yeah.
for coaches, right? Comparison, because you're, in my opinion, one of the pioneers of the online coaching space when it comes to, in my opinion, like conditioning programming. And so, if somebody has that fear of like, I'm not good enough, right? Other than getting more education, because that's also a problem, right? You overeducate and don't ever implement. Like, what kind of advice would you give them?
That everybody feels that way, that I feel that way, that I have people that I look up to from a coaching perspective that I feel inadequate at times. And so the way that I have been able to overcome that is realizing that everyone is probably experiencing it to some degree, or they have experienced it at some point. And there's also, you're not being judged as heavily as you think you are. Everybody has things going on, and you're not the first thing that's on everybody's mind. I think that this goes for how frequently you're posting on social media, and just putting yourself out there more is like no one is paying attention as closely as you think they are. And if they are, they need to get a life. They need to do something better with what they're with their time than just having hawk eyes on what you're doing specifically. And so that would be my encouragement. And the only way that you're going to get better is by doing the reps. The only way that I have gotten to the place to be able to receive the compliment, and I appreciate it from you, is that I've just put in the reps. I programmed when I had very little of an idea of what I was doing, and I constantly reached out and got more mentorship from people that knew that I looked up to. And I think that that's the other thing, is that I certainly did the textbook work and so on, but I spent a lot of money just reaching out to other coaches to teach me more of what they had been successful with their clients, and trying to understand why those things were successful. Because I use a lot of different training techniques. Today, we're talking about one specific, but I have a lot of different types of clients that are wanting to do different things, whether it be athletic or it be hypertrophy or it be strength driven and so on. And they all use a little bit of everything. And we just have to be able to take that knowledge and apply. I mean, when we're talking about program design at this point, we have 10 years of direct anecdotal experience on top of the uh, education that I've sought after the entire time as well. So there's a lot that goes into it. And I think that just getting the reps in and looking at it more from a day-to-day perspective and staying in your lane, focusing on your book, so on, I think is the key.
Have you ever tallied up how much you've spent or invested in like coaching courses, not including like college or any of that,
Sure.
but just like, have you ever? Because I have, and it's crazy.
Yeah, so we did this. There was a post that we were wanting to make, and I I wanted to find out for that specific post, and yeah, it was multiple six figures, and
Same.
I was surprised, but also not as like I wasn't shocked, but I still was surprised overall that it was that much money over the time span. And I would be curious, because what we did was just look at the courses or the mentorship hours that I had purchased. I can't imagine if we would have added in the flights and the hotel stays and all those things that would be alongside those things. It was just the courses themselves per se. So the one thing that I had to kind of overcome, because I came from a childhood of not having anything from a financial standpoint. My
Same.
parents took great care of us, but we did not have anything of luxury or excess. It was like exactly what you need, you're going to get it, and then we're going to move on. Take care of what you got. And so I carried that a little bit at the beginning of our time, like as we were building the company. And so every dollar that came in was like, okay, I don't want to spend any of this. I've got to hold this with white knuckles, and I'm just going to keep saving. And this is how my life is going to get better, because I'm going to save and be able to look at this money in this bank account and be like, I'm happy. And I did that for a little while. And guess what? That did not happen. I never was like, I'm happy. That did not, I was just like, just the next milestone and the next milestone. And really, where I found happiness was just putting back into the things I cared about, the things that I wanted to do and the things that I wanted to learn more about, and investing into myself. That's where I found the happiness of like, this is what the money is able to do for me, is that I'm able to build out my staff. I'm able to expand my knowledge. I'm able to travel and meet new people and do these different things. That's where the happiness really came. And once I allowed for myself to stop white knuckling the bank account and saving every penny possible, I was able to remove a lot of financial anxiety that I experienced, kind of unbeknownst to me, kind of just like part of how I was raised and what was instilled in me from a very early time.
I get that. I remember growing up, single dad, watching
Mhm.
him like hoard money in sock drawers. And, like we could afford Diet Coke, but it was the big K brand. If you live around a Kroger, you know what I'm talking about. But it's so funny. Like I remember growing up hearing him like make fun of people that were wealthy because,
Mhm.
like, oh, those rich people, right? And going into an industry like journalism where you're told you're not going to make money, like it's a service-based industry. And so I agree. When I started actually making money, it's not that I didn't want to invest in people, but I took so long to make decisions in the beginning, right? Like I would sit on a decision that I knew I should make, whether it was hiring somebody, investing in the person, and I would sit on it for like months. And then I'd make the decision and it would turn out tenfold. And I'm sure you can agree with this
100%.
statement where at this point, I make decisions stupid fast, right? Because the faster I make them, the faster I can collect data. But there's a room in my house that is not decorated, and I've lived here for 3 years, and that's just something that I don't care about, right? Like that's
Yeah.
not important to me. But making decisions in business is, because even if I make a calculated decision and maybe it's not the best one, I will still grow from it because I learned something. And I think that business owners have to understand that the more you make, the more risk tolerant you have to be, right? And I think that's one of the biggest reasons that so many coaches stay stuck at that, like, 10K, 20K mark, is they're hoarding onto it and they're
Mhm.
trying to do everything themselves because of a control issue or fear of losing money or whatever. I don't know if you see this. I know you're not like business coaching, but I'm curious
Yeah.
to know if you've seen that.
Yeah, I do see it with some coaches that I end up working with, whether it be for their own health and training, or it be through the mentorship. One thing I wanted to add before we get into this next topic is that uh, the two things that I celebrated as I got to be an adult was that I was able to buy Gatorade, because we did not have enough money to buy Gatorade. We had to buy the dollar 32-ounce Powerades, so we could only drink the Powerades and could never afford Gatorade. And then the second thing is having more than one coat. I only had one coat all growing up. Like every year I got a new coat because I grew, but I only got one coat. And so now as an adult, I'm like, I've got multiple coats. And this is like a real significance to my child that I am wealthy. I am so rich because I have more than one coat. So
Nice. I
yeah,
relate.
yeah, exactly. Um, so with what were you saying?
I'm dying at the coat thing. Also, I didn't realize that Powerade was that much cheaper. Now I need to look at this. But
Yeah. I don't know
I
if it still is, but it was at the time.
so now I have to share one that's I feel like relatable, but that's how I felt with show tickets, like concert tickets. So I've always listened to like rock, metal, Warp Tour was the vibe for me. But, tickets were something that my dad would buy me for like my birthday, it was a special occasion. And now I'm like, I can go to whatever show I want. I'm rich.
Yeah.
Even though show tickets are still like $30. I'm like, no, I can get them all. And you're relating it to like coats and Gatorades. I'm like, this is
Yeah.
totally relatable. But just again, kind of going back to that sticking point where for me, it's the mindset of going from a solopreneur to I'm a business owner, right? Because
Mhm.
really, there's a certain point in business where you're just making money. And if you're hyper fixated on profit margins, and that's the only way that you justify the business's performance, right? Again, we're assuming we're not like tanking, right? But
Mhm.
realistically, our industry is one of the only industries where profit margins are even above 40% sometimes. Like it's not normal. Like Amazon's is like 7, right? And they're 200 plus billion, right? But I don't think anyone would say Amazon isn't profitable. So I think it's that mindset shift with, okay, I need to hoard every dollar. And am I actually going to build a business that's going to give me generational wealth?
Right. Yeah. The thing that I would encourage is that the thing that got you to this point is probably not going to take you to the next. And I was one of those people that was tremendously hard-headed in accepting that. I thought that I was the exception to the rule and thought that I could just work my face off and continue to do the thing that got me to the point before that was going to get me to the next thing, and just continue to compound and compound more and more work on myself and drown in it and think that that was going to fix the issue or to take me to the next level or to give me the relief that I thought that it was going to give me. And the I would have benefited so much more. I would have gotten to places in our business far earlier if I would have just accepted that things needed to change, and it's okay that things need to change, and I need to learn a new skill. I need to ask for more help. I need to stop getting better at coaching and learn how to run a business more. That is one thing too, of just like, I thought that I just had to keep being the smartest and smartest coach on planet Earth and just keep investing and keep investing in the knowledge. And then the business will always take care of itself. And then the business kept having issues. And it's like, well, I don't know what to do. I'm just going to keep putting more into the comfort of what I had found of like, if I just keep getting smarter, I feel nice in my little nook over here. And the thing that scared me the most was learning about the business and hiring the right people and getting the infrastructure in place to really create the greatest client experience possible, not just when they're in the one-on-one setting with me. Like, that has been the thing that we have optimized for and have done a great job of, but everything else needs to get better now and needs to be at this level. And if we need all this, we need to learn new skills. We need to step outside of our comfort zone. And I think that a lot of people find themselves, if they're at the 10 to 20K marker, continuing to lean into the thing that they're comfortable with. And they've kind of found this cozy zone where if they're wanting to do more and beyond that, they're going to have to step out of that and probably get into some things that make them feel uncomfortable, and maybe some things that they've been shying away from up until that point.
I couldn't have said that better myself. It's so the amount, specifically bodybuilding coaches.
Yeah, very much so.
It's always and you know what? I'm going to clip this. Bodybuilding coaches, if you're listening to this right now, like, we're calling you out, because I swear they are the most resistant to change and help,
Yeah,
which doesn't make sense because they are some of the most consistent people in the kitchen, in the gym, with routine. But oh my God, so not efficient in their business and so unwilling to try something different. It's very interesting to me, but I'm laughing that you laughed at that because you understood what I was saying.
I get it.
I get it. So I have a question for you. What would you do, or what do you do if you set a goal in business and you don't meet it?
Gosh, I think the first thing is I throw a little bit of a pouty party. I get a little upset at the beginning. I think that that's probably the thing that I've had to accept a little bit, is that I get in a little pouty mood for a little bit of time and get frustrated about it. And then I get over myself, and Sue and I call it the 24-hour rule. Like, if something happens and you're not happy about it, you've got 24 hours to sit and sulk and be a little bitch. And then after this, we're going to actually figure out what's going on, but we're not going to continue this past the 24-hour period. And so then once we get into the data, I'm able to really see of like, this is where we missed the mark. We missed the mark within consistency leading up to this point. We missed the mark within this metric, or we need to do something more emphasizing within this. And the other thing that I really hone in on, if goals are not met or we're missing things, is that it is not a matter that I suck. It is a matter that something within the business is not going well. This is not something personally to do with me and people not liking me or whatever the case is. I find that to happen a lot with coaches because of how much the business is people's life, as well as how front facing they are, of like, they're their marketing, they're also the one running the coaching, and then they're also the business. And so for the business to not do well, it's very easy just to be like, well, I suck. If the business is sucking, I also suck. And disconnecting those things, I think, is tremendously important, because by having the two be intertwined and taking it personal when the business is not doing well is just slowing you down from actually getting it fixed, because now you've added a layer that doesn't actually exist. You're making it up in your head. And that is just causing you to have a lot of emotion and focus on the thing that's not actually going to fix the problem, whatever that may be. And so, and again, this is all coming from, I cannot say this enough to the listeners of this is coming from experience. I have made these errors repetitively. And this is why I'm sitting here of like, don't do this. Like surpass me, get this done far earlier in your business and understand these things and take them to heart, so that you don't have multiple years. Cause I would say that I probably fall into it at moments now. I just am able to catch it and pull myself out much faster now relative to years past where I'd probably sit in it for a month, 2 months, whatever the case may be, and allow for me to take it personally. So allowing for yourself to disconnect and look at the data and look at it for what it's worth, I think is huge.
Emotional regulation is really hard, right? I mean, it just
Yes.
is because it's really easy to clock in and clock out of a job and show up not having a great day. And not to say that you have to be 100% every day in business, but you do with your team. Like if you're a leader, like you have to compartmentalize some things some days, right? Like it doesn't matter that your boyfriend broke up with you. You've got to show up to work, right? You've got to still coach your clients to the best of your ability. And that's not to be an asshole or ruthless, but realistically things happen. And I find that so many coaches will have one thing that happened and they're off their rocker for like 3 months, right? Or maybe they had 3 clients quit in the same week. It just so happened that it was the same week. Maybe they've been with them for a year, two, whatever. Nothing was wrong, but like those moments used to throw me off too, right? Where I'm like, oh my God, I suck. Can I do this? It's all going to crumble tomorrow. What if it does crumble tomorrow? Like, I think it's important to know that even listening to this podcast, right? You and I are not robots and we're definitely not immune. Like, we still feel these things, but I think you would agree that we're able to identify those triggers quicker and can work through them faster, right?
Yes.
Because we just keep moving and that's the difference. And I don't even know if there's one piece of advice on like how do you keep moving, but I do think a lot of coaches have not identified what their vision is and why they're doing it. I think people get in the habit of just like, I'm making money and I'm making more money, so let's make more money. And
Mhm.
then when it feels really hard, because to me that's game time, right? When we're up and we're winning and numbers look great, that's when I'm kind of like, wait. Hold on. Okay, cool. I love this. But like, not that I'm waiting for something to go wrong, but I'm like, what is not getting my attention that I should really be paying attention to? Can you relate to that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I would say that the thing that gives me peace in however the ship goes is that I have made a lot of peace with myself of if it was all to burn down and this was all to stop working and so on, would I still want to do exactly what I'm doing? And the answer is a resounding yes. Like I would just continue to find another way to do exactly what I'm already doing. And so with that understanding and feeling that passionately about it and it continuing to burn to be stronger as the years continue to go on, that gives me a lot of peace of mind to take the leaps and take the jumps that I should within the business, because again, no matter what happens, I'm gonna keep doing exactly what I'm already doing. And so if you like and the coaches that are listening, they may not feel that passionate about it at this moment. They may not have had the experiences within helping people through some of the darkest moments of their life and getting that feeling of like, oh my gosh, I've pulled this person. I've been a part of pulling this person out. It has allowed for me to do that. It's allowed for me to take care of my family. It's put a roof over my head. It been something that I've been able to build with my wife. Like no matter what, this has given me more than I could ever repay the opportunity. And so every day I'm just looking at it from that lens of gratitude that I get this chance to do this every day and show up and do something that I love doing.
I always like to play the what if game. So if somebody is really worried that it might all crumble tomorrow, like if that is the crippling fear, I like to ask, then what? Like 7 times. I don't know if you've
Sure.
done this before, but you know what I'm talking about. And I think anyone listening could play that game with themselves, right? Okay, so like, what if it all crumbles tomorrow? What if? Well, then I would have at least a few months of savings. Okay, then what? Well, I get more clients. And then you kind of like talk yourself out of it, right? Because I think it's important to know that all of our thoughts are not true, right? Like our thoughts are not true. And you have to be able to differentiate what is true and what are we fabricating? Also, when everything is going right, stop creating problems that have not that are just like non-existent yet, right? Because I think as entrepreneurs, we're just prone to doing those things. Um, so question, as somebody who has some assistant coaches, right? If somebody has assistant coaches, one, two, three, whatever, right? And they're trying to really build that community and that culture to get people to buy into the vision, right? What is your advice for that?
So you're saying to build the culture and
Yeah,
community with the
community. Mhm.
coaches.
Correct. To really build
Okay.
that team culture. Yes.
So I find this to be something where spending direct time with the coaches to be beneficial. So like one thing that we like to do is just having a sit down and scheduling time to chat with the coaches, getting to know them more personally. And this is kind of just like after the workday is completed, a quick like 30-minute meeting can be beneficial just to chat and get to hang, especially with the coaches not being local. It would be amazing if we could go and grab coffee with them and spend time and so on. And we also like to do in-person retreats with the staff as a whole. We try to do that twice a year, and I wish that we could do it more. That is a tremendously helpful piece, but also utilizing however you guys are talking. So like we use Slack, and so on Slack, it's an opportunity for us to share different things that we have going on. Like in the mornings, I spend a lot of my time studying, and so I'll send studies that I have recently read that I think would be beneficial to the coaches, and it gives us an opportunity to kind of go back and forth on those things. I spend a lot of time also working on the coaches' cases that they have and helping them with different things that are going on with the coaches, and so being very invested in them, I think is a big part of this. Like we do a really strong emphasis on the coaches' education and paying for their education for different courses. We require the coaches to be in continued education courses that we finance. I think that that's the big thing because the coaches that we have on our staff right now have all been here for multiple years. And what I've seen with a lot of other staffs or coaches that I have worked with is that there's a big turnover with the assistant coaches as they are either chasing more money with different staffs or there's just better opportunity somewhere else and so on. And the one thing that we had such an emphasis on when we started bringing on the coaches is that I do not want it to be this ring around the rosy, changing chairs and so on. And I feel like we have built a culture and a system that really emphasizes like we want the coaches to get better and we want them to have all the support that they possibly need to be the best coaches that they can be. So we have the education, but then we also have monthly friends of mine and mentors of mine come in and do like an hourly or do an hour of education on different things that they would be wanting to learn about. So it's very education focused, and I think that investing back into the coaches is tremendously important. I will say that this has not been a foolproof plan. I would love to say that every coach that we've had has stayed because of this exact system. The majority have, and we've been burned in some situations where I've invested very heavily into the education of coaches and they've left. But I'll take the few not doing what I would want the outcome to be for the majority to be exactly what I want. And that trade-off, I think, is important to realize that you're not going to get 100% response in anything that you do. And you can see that throughout your entirety of your life. But then when you're trying to think of hypotheticals and trying to set up things within your business and talk about finances, a lot of people want this 100% certain thing that's going to give them all the results that they want. And that's just not going to happen.
The only other thing I would add to that too, it's just about team retention in general, is, when you first hire somebody, typically it's early on in business and your vision isn't totally clear, right? You just know that you need help. And so usually it's like one of your first few hires doesn't work out. Sometimes you get lucky and it's great, but oftentimes you're hiring somebody for relief, but then you don't actually onboard them like you would a client, right? You're just like, here you go, take the job, run with it. And I think making sure that your SOPs for a team member are very similar to as just detailed as onboarding a client, right? Like you're bringing a client in, they feel like they're part of a family. Like you want your team member to feel like they're part of something just bigger than them and bigger than just a paycheck, right? And I would argue that whether or not your percentage is bigger or less, like the person's going to go where they feel the most at home and where they have a game plan to grow. And so their vision needs to fit inside of your vision. And if you don't have, like, the meetings are of course great, but if you don't articulate to your team like what the mission is of your business and what you're doing, it's going to be hard for somebody to really buy into you as well.
I can't agree with that more. This is where having my wife Sue be the CEO of all this is the key. Like she is the person that has the ship going. I cannot imagine if I was to be doing all the things that I do within the content side and the coaching and so on, and then also doing all the things that she does from a business ownership standpoint. It would be impossible. And so we work we fill the gaps for one another tremendously well. And all the things that you brought up, I'm like, yep, that's that. The reason I didn't say anything is because that is not what I do. That is what Sue does. And so I'm very fortunate to have a teammate that fills the gaps like that.
I love that. Okay, last two things, and they're kind of quick, but number
Okay.
one, how do you de-stress? It's the number one
Oh
question I
man.
get from so many business owners. You've had a really hard week, maybe you're feeling a little burnt out. How do you de-stress at night and just like turn the brain off?
So I am huge on different rooms being for different things. Like I do not work on any work related things outside of this room. We have the podcast studio upstairs, but I don't go in there for anything else. So I have this right here. And as soon as I close this door, I try to disconnect as much as I possibly can with work. I have a journal that I write in at the end of the workday, and I just kind of like dump all of my thoughts for what that day was. Maybe there was some heavy check-ins that were challenging, and I'm carrying a lot of emotions from those. It may have been challenging within business or inquiring, whatever the case may be. I'm just writing those things down. I just journal for like 5 to 10 minutes when I finish the day, and it's kind of signals to myself as soon as I close that journal and I close those doors, it's all left here, and I'll get back into it when I come back here in the morning. And I think that having a consistent cutoff time for work as best as I possibly can. There's going to be seasons where it extends and so on, but on the majority of the days, I want to be able to close this up at the exact same time and then have a distinct period where I'm spending time with my wife and our dogs and being able to just be off of my devices. I think that that's the other thing is like people are they're coaching, they're on their laptop, they're on their computer, they're on their phone all throughout the day, and then they're spending time in the evening just scrolling their phone still. And it's like if you have maybe two different Instagrams that are, completely different algorithms and so on, maybe that will work. But if you're trying to disconnect from work and then you're just staying on your Instagram and scrolling and you're seeing other coaches and then you're also seeing all kinds of fitness stuff going on, it's probably not disconnecting you a whole lot. And so I'm big on having like no device days. So Sunday is a big day where I do not use my phone at all. This is something I've worked towards and have been able to put myself in a position to do. So Sunday is like a day where we do health things in the morning. We may go on walks, we may work out, we may go to yoga, and then I spend the whole day with my phone in here. I don't touch this phone at all, and that helps me recharge so tremendously. So those are some tools, and going to bed at the same time. I think that getting real ass sleep every day is a
Real
tremendous
ass
tool.
sleep.
Yeah.
Literally, I know. Real ass sleep. It's true. But
Yeah.
I think that, as business owners, right? You're not going to ever, in my opinion, have like just this perfect cookie cutter work week, right? And I think it's important to realize that just because you get to like the next level, whatever that means in your head, at least every time you grow substantially, you get pulled back into something and you climb your way out again, right? And so there's like ebbs and flows and seasons, but I think it's helpful for you to say that you do have a day without devices. And I agree. And
Yeah.
for me, that day or afternoon or whatever, that also means like no TV. Like I just don't want to look at a screen for a minute. You know what I mean? I'm like avoiding all screens. And I do think that's really helpful. I try to also have at least one day a week where I don't set an alarm.
Mm.
just like to see, I can't really sleep in, but just one day a week where there's not an alarm, where I force myself to have a slower morning because I'm somebody that if I'm not moving, I feel like I'm not productive, even when
Mhm.
I'm, you know what I mean? Like it's hard, right? And I think a
Yeah.
lot of entrepreneurs are psycho like that too. And so I force myself to have a slower morning where maybe I don't do my normal things and I read a book instead, or just take some time and have coffee on the couch. And so I don't think there's a perfect routine, and I know you know that,
No,
but cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Is there anything
absolutely.
else that I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't think so. I think we got through a lot of stuff. I hope that the listeners find this to be tremendously helpful and they got a lot out of it. And maybe they'll have some follow-up questions and so on.
And everything for Alex is linked in the show notes, guys. If you want to reach out to him and shoot him a DM or look into his mentorship, that is always an option. So I will link that below. And Alex, I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on.